the first time Mason Knight saw her. She was crumpled on the sidewalk outside the neighborhood cafe, mascara streaking down her face as rain pelted her expensive but rumpled clothes. He might have walked by God knows he had his own problems, but something in her desolate expression reminded him of himself after Rebecca left. And before he could think better of it, he was crouching down beside her, his 7-year-old daughter Emma peering curiously from under their shared umbrella. "Hey there," Mason said softly, keeping a respectful distance. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you okay?" The woman looked up, startled, raindrops mingling with tears on her cheeks. Her eyes, a striking amber green, widened with embarrassment. "I'm fine," she insisted automatically, though she clearly wasn't. She tried to stand but wobbled in her high heels, nearly toppling over. "Whoa, careful." Mason steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "I'm Mason. This is my daughter, Emma." "Hi," Emma said, twisting her small hand in a shy wave. "Your dress is pretty, even though it's all wet." The woman managed a watery smile. "Thank you, Emma. That's very kind." She looked at Mason, hesitating. "I'm Caitlin Pearson." "Look, Caitlin, I don't know what's going on, but you shouldn't be sitting out here in this weather. Can I call someone for you? Or maybe a cab?" Caitlin glanced down at her phone, its screen cracked. "My battery's dead, and my car." She gestured vaguely down the street, where an expensive-looking silver Audi sat with a flat tire. "Daddy, we can't leave her," Emma said firmly, with the clear moral certainty only a 7-year-old could possess. "You always say we have to help people." Mason hesitated. He had $32 in his wallet that needed to stretch until payday, a mountain of bills waiting at home, and a daughter he was desperately trying to provide a stable life for after her mother walked out 2 years ago. Getting involved in a stranger's problems wasn't on his to-do list. But Emma was right. That was exactly what he always taught her. "We live just around the corner," he offered. "You could dry off, charge your phone, and call whoever you need to help with your car." Caitlin studied him for a long moment, taking in his worn jeans, the coffee stain on his faded t-shirt, and the gentle way he held the umbrella over his daughter more than himself. "I wouldn't want to impose," she said. "It's not an imposition," Mason replied. "Just neighbors helping neighbors." The truth was, they weren't neighbors. Mason and Emma lived in the modest Pine Grove apartments across town, far from this upscale neighborhood where Mason worked odd maintenance jobs. They happened to be here today because Emma's after-school program had been canceled, and he'd picked up an emergency plumbing repair at a nearby restaurant. "Please come," Emma added. "Daddy makes the best hot chocolate when people are sad." That seemed to decide it. Caitlin nodded, gathering the remnants of her dignity along with her designer purse. The walk to Mason's truck was awkward. He apologized for the cluttered cab filled with plumbing tools and Emma's soccer gear as he cleared the passenger seat. Caitlin climbed in carefully, looking wildly out of place among the worn upholstery and fast food receipts. "Sorry about the mess," Mason said as he helped Emma into her booster seat in the back. "Wasn't expecting company today." "No, please. I'm the one who should be apologizing for putting you out like this." "Not at all," he said, starting the engine that sputtered slightly before catching. "Everyone needs help sometimes." The 15-minute drive to their apartment was mostly quiet, broken only by Emma's occasional commentary about the dogs they passed, or the rainbow appearing as the rain began to clear. Mason found himself sneaking glances at their unexpected guest, noticing how she nervously twisted a thin gold bracelet around her wrist. Their apartment building was a far cry from the neighborhood where he'd found Caitlin. The bricks needed repointing, and the hallway smelled perpetually of someone's cooking, but it was clean and safe, the best Mason could afford on his income as a freelance handyman and weekend bartender. "It's not much," he said apologetically as he unlocked the door to 3B, "but it's home." Caitlin stepped inside, taking in the modest living space. Though small, the apartment was tidy and warm. Crayon drawings adorned the refrigerator, and mismatched but comfortable furniture filled the living room. A stack of library books sat on the coffee table alongside a half-completed puzzle. "It's lovely," she said, and something in her tone suggested she meant it. "Daddy, can I show her my room?" Emma asked, already tugging at Caitlin's hand. Let our guest catch her breath first," Mason said. "How about that hot chocolate I promised? With the little marshmallows." Emma's eyes lit up. "Is there any other way?" Mason winked, heading to the kitchen. "Make yourself at home, Caitlin. Bathrooms down the hall if you want to dry off." Left with Emma, Caitlin found herself being led to the couch. "This is where Daddy sleeps sometimes when he falls asleep watching basketball," Emma informed her. "And that's my school picture. I lost my front tooth the day before." Caitlin found herself genuinely smiling for the first time that day. "You look beautiful, gap and all." Emma beamed. "Why were you crying? Did you get a boo-boo?" "Emma," Mason called from the kitchen, "remember what we said about personal questions?" "It's okay," Caitlin assured him. To Emma, she said, "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're having a hard day. My boo-boo is more on the inside." Emma nodded sagely. "Daddy says those are the ones that need the most Band-Aids." By the time Mason returned with mugs of hot chocolate, Caitlin had composed herself. He handed her a phone charger, which she gratefully accepted. "So," he said, settling into the armchair across from her, "bad day." Caitlin laughed humorlessly. "You could say that." She wrapped her hands around the mug, seeking its warmth. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day." Mason nearly choked on his hot chocolate. "Oh, wow, I'm sorry. Don't be, I'm the one who called it off. Last night, actually." She sighed heavily. "Found out my fiancé was more interested in merging our family companies than in marrying me." "That's awful," Mason said genuinely. "The worst part is, everyone saw it but me. My parents, my friends. They all tried to warn me that Gregory was calculating, that he didn't love me for me." She shook her head. "I was such a fool." "Hey," Mason said gently, "trusting someone who promises to love you doesn't make you a fool." Caitlin looked up, studying his face. "You sound like you speak from experience." "Maybe a little." He glanced at Emma, who had wandered off to retrieve her favorite stuffed bunny. "My ex-wife decided parenthood wasn't for her after all, left when Emma was 5. "I'm sorry," Caitlin said, and he could tell she meant it. "It's been 2 years. We're doing okay now." He smiled at Emma, who had returned and was now demonstrating her bunny's dancing skills to Caitlin. "Some days are harder than others, but we get by." Caitlin watched the interaction between father and daughter with a wistful expression. "You seem like a wonderful father." "I try. It's not always easy." He hesitated. "Single parenting while trying to keep the lights on. There are days I feel like I'm failing her." "You're not," Caitlin said firmly. "Any child this happy is clearly well-loved." Mason felt his cheeks warm slightly at the compliment. There was something about Caitlin beyond her obvious beauty that drew him in. A genuineness that seemed at odds with her polished exterior. "Your phone should have enough charge now if you want to make some calls," he offered. Caitlin nodded but made no move toward her phone. Instead, she asked, "What do you do, Mason?" "Whatever pays the bills," he answered honestly. "I've got a handyman business, plumbing, electrical, carpentry. I tend bar on Saturday nights. In between, I pick up whatever work I can find." "Jack of all trades," she said with appreciation. "Master of none," he finished with a self-deprecating smile. "But it lets me set my own schedule, which is important with Emma." They talked easily after that, the conversation flowing naturally as the rain outside subsided completely. Mason learned that Caitlin worked in family business management. Though she was vague about specifics, loved historical fiction, and had a weakness for street tacos from a particular food truck downtown, the same one Mason occasionally splurged on when he had a job in that area. Emma, tired of being ignored, inserted herself between them on the couch with her favorite picture book. Before long, Caitlin was reading aloud, doing different voices for each character while Emma giggled delightedly. Mason watched them, feeling an unexpected tug in his chest. It had been a long time since another adult had sat in his living room, laughing with his daughter. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that for a moment he allowed himself to imagine what it might be like if this were more than a chance encounter. The moment was interrupted by Caitlin's phone ringing. She glanced at it, her expression clouding. "I should take this. It's my assistant, probably wondering why I've gone AWOL." She stepped into the kitchen for privacy. Mason could hear murmured conversation but couldn't make out the words. When she returned, her posture had changed, shoulders back, chin up, the vulnerability of earlier carefully tucked away. "I need to go," she said. "I've arranged for my car to be towed and a car service is on its way to pick me up." "Oh," Mason said, surprised by his own disappointment. "Well, glad we could help." "You did more than help," Caitlin said softly. "You reminded me that there are good people in the world, exactly when I needed that reminder." She knelt down to Emma's level. "Thank you for sharing your home and your daddy's famous hot chocolate with me." Emma threw her arms around Caitlin's neck in a fierce hug. "Will you come back and see us?" Mason started to intervene. Of course, this woman from another world wouldn't be returning to their modest apartment, but Caitlin beat him to it. "I'd like that very much," she said, meeting Mason's eyes over Emma's shoulder. She pulled a business card from her purse and pressed it into his hand. "If that would be okay with your dad." Mason looked down at the simple cream-colored card. It read only Caitlin Pearson with a phone number, no company name or title. "It would be," he said, surprised by his own boldness. "Very okay." A car horn sounded outside. Caitlin gathered her things, pausing at the door. "Thank you, Mason, for everything." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the memory of her smile. For 3 days, Mason debated calling the number on Caitlin's card. The encounter had been unusual, to say the least. She had been vulnerable, emotional, not exactly circumstances conducive to forming a real connection. And the differences in their lives were obvious. Whatever family business management meant, it clearly paid better than fixing leaky faucets and rewiring old houses. Emma, however, had no such reservations. "When is Caitlin coming back?" she asked every evening at dinner. "I want to show her my science project, and Bunny misses her." By Thursday, Mason gave in. The worst that could happen was rejection, and he'd survived that before. He called during his lunch break, half expecting to reach a secretary or assistant. Instead, Caitlin answered on the second ring. "Mason," she said, sounding genuinely pleased, "I was hoping you'd call." "Yeah," he couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. "I wasn't sure if." "Well, if Sunday was just a weird day that you'd rather forget. Actually, it was the most real conversation I've had with anyone in a long time." There was a pause. "I'd like to see you again, and Emma, of course." "We'd like that too." Mason hesitated. "There's a community fair at Emma's school this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just games and food trucks and a small carnival. Emma's been looking forward to it for weeks." "That sounds perfect." "Great. It starts at noon, but I'll be there at 11:30, Caitlin said decisively. "Text me the address." When Saturday arrived, Mason found himself unusually nervous. He changed his shirt twice, settling on a simple blue button-down that Emma assured him looked handsome, and made sure his daughter's face was clean of the breakfast syrup she'd inevitably gotten everywhere. They arrived at Oak Ridge Elementary at 11:25, Emma practically vibrating with excitement at both the fair and seeing Caitlin again. Mason scanned the parking lot, looking for any sign of her. "Will we recognize her car, Daddy?" Emma asked. "I'm not sure, sweetheart." "Her other one had a flat tire, remember?" "I bet it's that one," Emma said, pointing to a sleek black Tesla that had just pulled into the lot. "It looks fancy like her." Mason chuckled. "Not everyone who dresses nicely drives, eh?" He stopped as the driver's door opened and Caitlin stepped out, looking radiant in jeans and a simple white top, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Caitlin?" Emma broke free of his hand and ran toward her, stopping just short of a hug, suddenly shy. Caitlin knelt down, opening her arms. I believe I was promised a science project demonstration today. Emma beamed and threw herself into the hug. It's about the water cycle, and Bunny is at home, but I told him you said hi. I'm glad, Caitlin said, rising to her feet as Mason approached. Their eyes met, and Mason felt that same inexplicable connection he'd sensed in his living room days ago. You came, he said, immediately feeling foolish for stating the obvious. I said I would. She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I've been looking forward to it all week. The fair was exactly as advertised, modest, but charming, with the organized chaos that comes with hundreds of elementary school children running amok among carnival games and cotton candy stands. To Mason's surprise and relief, Caitlin seemed completely at ease, laughing as Emma pulled her from one activity to the next. She showed no sign of condescension as they ate hot dogs from paper trays, cheered Emma on during the sack race, and waited in line for face painting. In fact, she seemed to revel in the simplicity of it all, a fact Mason commented on as they watched Emma on the merry-go-round. I would have thought this might be a bit, I don't know, mundane for you, he admitted. Caitlin's expression turned thoughtful. Can I tell you something? Of course. This is the most fun I've had in years. She looked around at the fairgrounds, at the families enjoying the simple pleasures of a community gathering. My life looks glamorous from the outside, I suppose, but it's mostly meetings and galas where everyone is trying to impress everyone else. No cotton candy at those galas, I'm guessing, Mason joked. Definitely not, she laughed. And definitely no one who looks at me the way Emma does, like I'm just a person worth knowing, not a connection worth making. Kids have a way of cutting through the nonsense, Mason agreed. It's one of the best things about being a parent. You're very good at it, Caitlin said softly. Being a parent, I mean. Mason felt himself flush with pride. I'm trying. Sometimes I worry that Emma's missing out because I can't give her everything other kids have. Material things aren't what make childhood magical, Caitlin said firmly. It's moments like these. Trust me, I had every luxury growing up, and I would have traded all of it for more days like today. Something in her tone made Mason wonder about her upbringing, but before he could ask, Emma returned, face painted like a tiger, demanding they try the ring toss. The afternoon passed in a blur of games, laughter, and surprisingly deep conversation snatched in moments between activities. By the time the fair was winding down, Mason felt as though he'd known Caitlin for years rather than days. As they walked toward the parking lot, Emma skipping ahead with her prizes, a small stuffed elephant, and a plastic trophy from the beanbag toss, Caitlin turned to Mason. I don't want today to end, she admitted. Me neither, Mason said, surprised by his own honesty. Would you two like to get dinner? Nothing fancy, just more time together. We'd love that, Mason said without hesitation. But I should warn you, Emma's going to crash hard in about an hour. All this excitement takes its toll. Caitlin smiled. Perfect timing for a pizza delivery and a movie at your place then. And so their first real date ended with Caitlin, Mason, and a sleeping Emma on the couch, a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table, and the credits of Finding Nemo rolling on the small TV. Emma's head was in Mason's lap, her feet stretched across Caitlin's knees. I should go, Caitlin whispered, though she made no move to get up. You could stay, Mason offered, then quickly clarified, I mean for a while longer. We could talk. Caitlin nodded, carefully shifting Emma's feet as she stood. I'll make some coffee. In the kitchen, Mason watched as she navigated his cabinets with surprising ease, finding mugs and filters as though she'd been there 100 times. You fit here, he said suddenly. She turned, coffee pot in hand. What? In our lives, he clarified. You fit. It's strange. Good strange, but strange. Caitlin set down the coffee pot and crossed to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral. I feel it too, she said quietly. I've never connected with anyone the way I do with you and Emma. Mason's heart hammered in his chest. Caitlin, I know we barely know each other, but the moment was broken by his phone ringing sharply on the counter. He glanced at it, frowning. It's Mrs. Finley from next door. She only calls when there's a problem. The call was brief, but concerning. The building's aging water heater had burst, flooding the basement storage units, including the one where Mason kept some of Emma's baby things and mementos from his own childhood. I have to go check the damage, he said apologetically, as he ended the call. I can't leave Emma alone, but I need to salvage what I can before everything's ruined. Go, Caitlin said firmly. I'll stay with Emma. She won't even know you're gone. Are you sure? It's a lot to ask. Mason. She placed a hand on his arm. Trust me, I've got this. He did trust her, he realized. Completely and without reservation, which was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. The basement was as bad as Mrs. Finley had described, 2 inches of water covering the floor, cardboard boxes sagging and disintegrating. Mason worked quickly, rescuing photo albums and memory boxes, setting aside things that were already beyond saving. When he returned to the apartment an hour later, he found Emma still sleeping and Caitlin sitting beside her, gently stroking her hair. The scene filled him with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper too. Everything okay? Caitlin asked softly. Saved most of it, he said, setting down a plastic bin of photos. Lost some baseball cards and a few of Emma's baby clothes that were in the bottom boxes. I'm sorry, she said, and he could tell she understood these weren't just things to him, they were tangible connections to memories he cherished. It's just stuff, he said, though they both knew it wasn't. Let me help you dry out the photos at least, Caitlin offered. My grandson taught me how to restore water-damaged photographs. They worked side by side at the kitchen table, carefully separating stuck pages and blotting moisture from irreplaceable images. There was something deeply intimate about the task, about Caitlin seeing these glimpses into his past Mason as a gangly teenager with his parents. Baby Emma in her christening gown, the house he'd owned with Rebecca before the divorce forced its sale. You look just like her, Caitlin said, pointing to a photo of Emma as a toddler. Everyone says she's the spitting image of her mother. No, Caitlin shook her head. She has your expressions, your smile, the way you both tilt your head when you're thinking hard about something. Mason stared at her, struck by how closely she must have been observing them both. You notice a lot. I notice you, she said simply. Then, with deliberate casualness, where's Emma's mother now? California. She sends birthday cards sometimes, calls on Christmas. He shrugged. She wasn't ready for a family. I can't really blame her for that. I can, Caitlin said with unexpected fierceness. Emma is incredible. You're incredible. She missed out on an amazing life with you both. The words hung between them, charged with meaning. Before Mason could respond, Emma stirred on the couch, murmuring sleepily. I should get her to bed, Mason said. Caitlin nodded, gathering her purse. I'll head out. Will you? Mason paused, uncertain. Will you have dinner with me? Just us, I mean. My neighbor owes me a favor. She'd be happy to watch Emma. Yes, Caitlin said immediately. Tomorrow. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, her lips soft against his skin. Good night, Mason. Good night, Caitlin. As he closed the door behind her, Mason touched his cheek where her lips had been, feeling like a teenager after a first date, instead of a 32-year-old single father with a mortgage-sized pile of debt and a flooded storage unit. But something had shifted tonight. Whatever was happening between them, it was real. And for the first time in years, Mason allowed himself to hope. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant where the chef greeted Mason by name. He'd repaired the kitchen plumbing during the pandemic when no one else would come out. The food was excellent, the ambience intimate, and the conversation flowed as easily as the wine Mason couldn't really afford but ordered anyway. I have a confession, Caitlin said as they lingered over dessert. I looked you up. You Googled me, Mason laughed. Find anything interesting? Your website, actually, for your handyman business. She stirred her espresso. You're quite talented, those kitchen renovations were impressive. Thanks. I've been trying to shift more toward renovation work. It pays better than emergency repairs, and I can schedule it around Emma's school. He hesitated. Speaking of work, you've been kind of vague about yours. Caitlin tensed almost imperceptibly. It's complicated. Family business management, right? What does that entail exactly? She sighed, setting down her spoon. Mason, there's something I should tell you. Something I probably should have told you that first day. The serious shift in her tone alarmed him. Okay. My family, we have a certain amount of financial security. Mason nodded slowly. I gathered you were doing well for yourself. It's more than that. She looked uncomfortable. My grandfather started Pearson Innovations. My father expanded it into Pearson Global. Mason blinked. Even he recognized those names. Pearson Global was a Fortune 500 company with interests in everything from tech to real estate. So you're the CFO, she finished. And heir to the Pearson fortune, such as it is. Mason sat back, processing this information. That's a lot more than doing well for yourself. I know I should have been upfront about it. She reached for his hand across the table. But that first day, when you found me, I was so relieved that you didn't recognize me. You just treated me like a person, not a Pearson. And then with Emma, everything was so normal and wonderful. I didn't want to change that. I see. Mason withdrew his hand slightly. So what was I? Some kind of experiment in how the other half lives? No, God, no. Caitlin looked genuinely distressed. Mason, these past 2 weeks have been the most real part of my life in years. You and Emma, you see me, the real me, not my family name or my bank account. And what about me? Mason asked quietly. Do you see the real me? The guy who checks his account balance before buying groceries, who picks up bartending shifts to afford Emma's soccer cleats, or am I just a novelty to you? That's not fair, Caitlin said, hurt evident in her voice. I've never once made you feel less than. I don't care about your bank balance. Easy to say when yours has more zeros than I can imagine, Mason retorted, then immediately regretted his tone. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. Caitlin's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I understand why you're upset. I wasn't completely honest with you. It's not that, Mason said, realizing it was true as he spoke. I don't care that you have money, Caitlin. I care that you felt you had to hide a huge part of your life from me. What else don't I know about you? She was quiet for a long moment. Nothing important, she finally said. Yes, I have resources most people don't. Yes, my family name opens doors. But the woman who reads to Emma and helps salvage your family photos and laughs at your terrible jokes, that's the real me. The me I don't get to be very often. Mason studied her face, searching for any sign of insincerity. He found none. Where do we go from here? He asked. Because I like you, Caitlin, a lot, but I need to know we're living in the same reality. We are, she insisted. My reality includes board meetings and trust funds, yes. But it also includes wanting to be with someone who values me for myself. Someone like you. The vulnerability in her expression touched something deep inside him. Maybe she hadn't told him everything, but she was telling him the truth now. Okay, he said finally. We take it slow, see if this thing between us is strong enough to bridge our different worlds. Relief washed over Caitlin's face. I'd like that. They walked to her car hand in hand, the tension of earlier dissolving into a comfortable silence. When they reached the Tesla, which Mason now understood wasn't just fancy, but a 6-figure vehicle, Caitlin turned to face him. Would you like to see where I live? She asked. Next weekend, maybe. You could bring Emma. I have a pool. A pool, huh? Mason smiled. Emma would love that. And you? I'd love to see your world, he said honestly. All of it. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, a soft, questioning kiss that quickly deepened into something more. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Good night, Mason Knight, she whispered against his lips. Good night, Caitlin Pearson, he replied, watching as she slipped into her car and drove away. Despite their agreement to take things slow, the following weeks passed in a whirlwind of integration. Caitlin became a regular fixture at the Knight household, joining them for movie nights and helping Emma with her reading. Mason and Emma visited her sprawling lakeside home, where Emma declared the pool the bestest place ever, and Mason tried not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer luxury surrounding him. There were moments of discomfort, like when Caitlin casually offered to pay for Emma's private school tuition, not understanding why Mason's pride bristled at the suggestion, or when Mason felt hopelessly out of place at a charity gala where Caitlin was being honored. But for every awkward moment, there were dozens of perfect ones. Caitlin teaching Emma to make her grandmother's secret cookie recipe, Mason showing Caitlin how to use power tools as they built a treehouse in her backyard for Emma and other children who might visit. The three of them falling asleep on Caitlin's enormous couch during a thunderstorm, a tangle of limbs and shared warmth. 2 months after their first meeting, Mason realized with startling clarity that he was in love with her. The revelation came not during a grand romantic moment, but while watching Caitlin attempt to fix Emma's bicycle chain, her designer clothes smeared with grease, determination etched on her face. "You don't have to do that," he said, kneeling beside her with the proper tools. "I can fix it." "I know you can," she said, frustrated, "but I want to learn. I can't just call someone every time something breaks." "Why not? You can afford it." She looked up at him, grease streaking her cheek. "Because that's not the life I want, not anymore." "What life do you want?" he asked, his heart pounding. Caitlin gestured around them at Emma's modest bedroom, at the apartment that had initially embarrassed him, but that Caitlin had never once criticized. "This one," she said simply. "With you, with Emma, a real life where things break and you fix them. Where happiness isn't something you purchase, it's something you build together." Mason set down his wrench. "Caitlin, I love you." The words hung between them for a heartbeat before her face broke into a radiant smile. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much." Their first kiss had been passionate. This one was transformative, a promise, a beginning, a declaration of intent. "Does this mean Caitlin's going to be my new mom?" Emma asked from the doorway, startling them both. Mason looked at Caitlin, uncertain how to answer, but she spoke without hesitation. "Not yet, sweetie. But someday, if you and your dad want that, nothing would make me happier." "Cool," Emma said with the casual acceptance of childhood. "Can you fix my bike now? I want a ride to the park." They both laughed, the moment of gravity broken by Emma's practicality. As they worked together on the bicycle, Mason marveled at how seamlessly Caitlin had woven herself into their lives and how completely he and Emma had changed hers. 6 months later, Mason found himself standing in Caitlin's childhood bedroom in her parents' estate, changing into a suit that cost more than his monthly rent. The Knight Pearson engagement party was in full swing downstairs, a gathering that brought together their two vastly different worlds with surprisingly little friction. "Nervous?" asked Michael, Caitlin's brother, who had become Mason's unexpected friend over recent months. "Terrified," Mason admitted, adjusting his tie. "Half the guests are Fortune 500 CEOs, and the other half are my poker buddies and Emma's teacher." Michael laughed. "Kate couldn't care less about impressing the CEO crowd. Haven't you figured that out yet?" "She's happier now than I've seen her in years." "Still," Mason said, "I don't want to embarrass her." "The only way you could embarrass her is by pretending to be someone you're not." Michael clapped him on the shoulder. "She loves you because you're real, Mason. Don't forget that." Downstairs, Mason found Emma entertaining Caitlin's grandmother with elaborate stories, completely unfazed by her audience or surroundings. His daughter had adapted to their new reality with the resilience of childhood, accepting without question that love could bridge any divide. Across the room, he spotted Caitlin deep in conversation with his former mother-in-law, who had flown in specifically for the engagement party. The sight of them together, Caitlin making his former mother-in-law laugh, despite her initial skepticism, filled him with warmth. As if sensing his gaze, Caitlin looked up, her eyes finding his instantly across the crowded room. She excused herself and made her way to him, radiant in a simple blue dress that matched his tie, a detail she'd planned with Emma's help. "There you are," she said, slipping her arm around his waist. "I was beginning to think you'd escaped through a window." "The thought crossed my mind," he admitted, pulling her close. "Overwhelmed? A little," he conceded, "but worth it." She studied his face. "We don't need all this, you know." "The big party, the society wedding my mother's already planning. We could elope, just us and Emma on a beach somewhere." Mason smiled, touched by the offer. "Your family matters to you. I want you to have the celebration you deserve." "You're what I deserve," she said fiercely. "You and Emma and our future together. The rest is just window dressing." A year ago, Mason had been a struggling single father with mounting bills and dwindling prospects. Today, he stood in the home of one of the country's wealthiest families, engaged to a woman who could have had anyone but had chosen him. Yet the greatest change wasn't in his circumstances, but in his heart. Caitlin had given him more than financial security or social status. She'd given him partnership, understanding, and a love that saw him completely. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He handed her a small box. Inside was a simple silver key on a handcrafted leather keychain stamped with their initials. "The key to your heart," she teased gently. "The key to our home," he corrected. "I signed the papers yesterday. That little craftsman house near Emma's school. The one with the big backyard and the maple tree you loved." Caitlin's eyes widened. "But I thought that you'd buy it. I know you could have, but I wanted to do this for us." He took her hands in his. "I used the advance from my new contract with that restoration company, plus some savings." "It's ours, Caitlin, really ours." Tears filled her eyes. "You knew exactly what would mean the most to me, didn't you?" "A home we build together," he said, echoing her words from months before. "A real life where things break and we fix them." She kissed him then, heedless of the roomful of guests. "I love you, Mason Knight. And I love you, soon-to-be Caitlin Knight." From across the room, Emma gave them an enthusiastic thumbs up, making them both laugh. Their journey had begun with a chance encounter on a rainy sidewalk, a woman at her lowest moment, a man who stopped to help despite his own struggles, and a little girl who insisted they couldn't leave her there. None of them could have predicted where that moment would lead, or how completely their lives would intertwine. As they rejoined the party hand in hand, Mason reflected that perhaps the truest wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or property portfolios, but in the courage to open your heart when life had given you every reason to keep it closed. By that measure, he and Caitlin were equally rich, and the future they would build together, a future with Emma and perhaps more children, with challenges and triumphs, with love as their foundation, would be their greatest asset of all.